Hello, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to our Women in Sectional Title webinar today. This platform seeks to link like-minded women who really value the relationships in sectional title schemes. We link like-minded women who are the key stakeholders in this vibrant and exciting sectional title industry that we're all part of. To what end, you might ask? Well, we aim to inspire, to educate, to bring you right to the forefront of what's going on in our industry, and that applies to owners in sectional title, women who are owners, women who are trustees, of course, women who are managing agents. Most of our portfolio managers attend these webinars, developers and estate agents. So a very warm welcome to all of you today. We couldn't do this without the strong support of our sponsors, We Connect You, which is a proudly South African company specializing in developing software solutions for the property management industry. Compliance, manageability, scalability, and profitability are the core foundations which their solutions are centered around. We do appreciate their loyalty and input. And of course, ASI Best Sure. ASI Best Sure offers sectional title insurance with tailored risk management and insurance solutions. Their vision is to be the most significant financial services insurance company in South Africa. So thank you very much to our sponsors. So we've been very excited about today's webinar for everybody. And the lady that we're going to be talking today is influential. She's resilient. She's outspoken. And I don't really need to introduce her to all of you, but I'm going to because it befits her gravitas. So it is a great privilege to introduce Helen Zille to you today, a woman who's played a significant role in shaping South Africa's democratic landscape over the past 4 decades. Helen is a former journalist, an anti-apartheid activist. She was a mayor, a premier, political leader and public servant whose career has been defined by a commitment to accountability, constitutional democracy and public service. Before entering politics, Helen worked as a journalist for the Rand Daily Mail, where she gained national recognition for her investigative reporting on the death of Steve Biko, helping to expose the truth behind one of the most significant events in South Africa's history. She went on to serve as mayor of Cape Town from 2006 to 2009, and as Premier of the Western Cape from 2009 to 2019, where she became known for her focus on governance, service delivery, and institutional accountability. Helen also served as federal leader of the Democratic Alliance and most recently as chairperson of the DA's Federal Council, playing a key role in shaping opposition politics and contributing to South Africa's evolving democratic landscape. So very, very warm welcome again to Helen. We have been chatting. Welcome, Helen. Lovely to have you on our webinar today.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you very much, Marina, and good day to all the participants.
Thank you. And you must be feeling pretty buoyant today after Bafana Bafana's victory over South Korea, 1-0 last night.
Yes, that was very nice. And the goal was really beautifully scored. So it was a cheerful way to wake up. I'm afraid I didn't wake up early enough to watch the match, but I loved getting the news first thing this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Helen, the first question I want to ask you is whether or not you've ever lived in a sectional title complex before.
Well, my parents have in Joburg. They lived in Athol.
Right.
And they lived actually in 2 successive sectional title complexes in Athol. And I'm not sure whether where I used to previously live in Cape Town was a sectional title complex, because it was the retirement village of the University of Cape Town initially, where professors went to retire with their families or with their spouses. I suppose by that stage their children had been gone out of the house. But that's a very interesting scheme. It's designed to make living into old age affordable while not leaving much to your heirs. So it works in this way. It's a very interesting financial model, and I don't know whether it would count as sectional title. It's a life right scheme, but it's a life right scheme with a difference. It's a life right scheme where you buy in And we paid about, I think, we better put people on silent if they're
Yes,
not
I
on
think
silent.
people need to please mute yourselves. We are trying to mute people, but there are quite a few people here. So please mute yourself so that we don't hear what's going on in the background. Carry on, Helen. Thank you. So you've also been muted. Just you could unmute yourself, please, Helen.
I think they did a universal mute
They
there.
did.
Okay, no problem. Now here I am back. Okay, so in the interesting scheme that we live in or lived in Cape Town was the following. You'd buy in for a certain amount, let's say 2 million. And then when you die, you only get 2 million back, even if the value is now 5 million, let's say, because you've lived there for 25 years. And the idea is that when they sell the unit that you've occupied after revamping it for 5 million, you only get 2 million back, and the residential complex keeps the remaining 3 million to subsidize levies and other things. So basically what it does for you is give you an affordable old age, but doesn't leave much to your heirs, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
And for people who've worked as academics and other people like that, it's very useful. And obviously we put to our children, we said, listen, do you want to be looking after us in old age, or do you want us to be looking after ourselves? And these are the options. And they said, no, we're happy not to inherit. Rather just make sure that you can go into a place that will look after you, whatever happens to you. So that's a very good model, and I like it very much. Is that a sectional title scheme? I'm not sure.
No, so that wouldn't be sectional title. It would form under the life rights model, and it's definitely viable. You do get retirement villages, which are sectional title schemes, which are actually registered sectional titles. So you do get that increase in value. But of course, certainly it's more expensive. And when you say that your parents lived in these schemes, what was their experience in the schemes? Was it generally good?
Yes, I think they liked it very much. They liked living there. They came from a large freehold home, and they loved the cluster living. They loved the security. They liked the friendships that they developed. Yes, so I think they loved it very much.
Good, good. Well, that's good to hear, because when you're in my position as a sectional title attorney, you often hear the other side of things, which sort of discourages one from entering into the community scheme lifestyle. Helen, I want to place in context for you as the sectional title lay of the land, as it were, from the Community Scheme Ombud Services 2025 last quarter report. You've got 37,613 schemes, that's homeowners associations and sectional title registered with the Ombud Service. The Ombud Service then tells us that 40% of that, it's only 40% of the entire amount of schemes in South Africa. So we're actually looking at about 70,000 schemes in South Africa, and they reckon that just over 12,000 are in Gauteng. So we've got an enormous amount of people who are living in these sectional title schemes. And I wanted to hear from you, local government at the moment. Is local government, are these officials, do they sufficiently understand sectional title in terms of the services and things that they provide to these schemes?
Well, I never like to generalize entirely because I don't know whether any local government officials have sufficient insight and understanding of these schemes. As you could hear from the introduction, I certainly don't. I don't know the minute details between a life rights scheme and a sectional title scheme. I do know the difference, obviously, between a sectional title scheme and a freehold scheme. That I do know. But all of these things are complex and they have their legal specificities. And I certainly don't think that there's enough appreciation or understanding by municipal governments of these schemes and their specific legal framing. And I also don't think there's enough understanding from the schemes, the sectional title schemes and many others, of the complexities of local government. So I think it's a two-way street. And I think that a lot of work has to be done in getting better communication, better channels of mutual understanding and insight. I think that's going to be very important in the whole process. And I've enjoyed preparing for this seminar because I knew absolutely nothing about sectional title schemes before I began. Now I know a little, but not nearly enough.
Such an interesting area, but of course it can be a complete minefield. And I agree with you. I think that sectional title schemes have sort of burgeoned into this enormous percentage of housing stock in South Africa, and there hasn't been this reciprocal increase in knowledge around it. So they're more focused on freehold, in my experience, and specifically, Helen, regarding billing. Billing is something that we really struggle with in sectional title schemes. And of course, valuations, you know, the valuation story, both in Joburg, Ekurhuleni, Cape Town, valuations also come across, you know, in quite a dim light. Building inspections, things like that as well. In sectional title schemes, we don't have the correct kind of input from building inspectors to go and see whether schemes are compliant, that kind of thing as well. Also, you know, sectional title schemes provide services that the municipalities obviously struggle to deliver. It's security, it's maintenance, it's water management. What kind of recognition or support from local government do you think could be given in this regard? You said channeling communication. I think that's really important.
I think you asked about 4 or 5 questions in one. Let's take them one at a time. You said that there are a large number of people living in sectional title schemes, which I agree with you, and they're a growing percentage of the housing stock. Absolutely, yes. And there's a massive problem, number one, with billing. Yes, there is. And there's a problem with billing to absolutely every ratepayer and resident of Joburg who uses services that have to be paid for. So the billing system in Joburg is in absolute chaos. But I understand there is an additional dimension for sectional title schemes because often they're built on what is viewed by the municipality as a single earth, yet they are subdivided into different units. And because collectively those units use a large amount of power and water, let's say, they don't apply for the user tariffs that they would if they were recognized as single dwellings. And that creates a massive problem. So it requires the property holder, basically, to apply for a reseller's permit, a reseller's permit, and they have to get that permit in order to enable the separate units to register as units that are billed individually and not collectively. And that is a big problem. And I understand that there is a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of hurdles that have to be overcome to manage that system. Now, that is where I think the communications come in. I think that individual sectional title units need to be billed as individual units, not as a collective. And I think there needs to be a very special desk in development planning at the city to enable the applications for a reseller's license to be handled very quickly and smoothly so that everybody knows how to do it, and that the individual units can then be billed on the regular residential tariff for the basic services that they pay for. And I think that that is a problem structurally in that there isn't such a point of contact or an efficient point of contact in the city. And I don't think people know how to use those communication channels. And I also think that amongst boards of trustees and other governance structures in sectional titles, I often think that they don't quite understand how the system works and get to use it efficiently. So it's a two-way street. The city has to step up, and equally, I think many of the governance structures, the trustees, need to do the same.
I think what I've made a note here to say, we almost need a dedicated municipal liaison officer, and that's
Correct.
exactly what you've said. It's
That's what I've said,
important.
yeah.
And
That's
I
what I've said, yeah.
think Sandy Lodder also on the chats mentioned that the departments also don't speak to each other, in terms of what's happening in the sectional title development. So one scheme has got different departments dealing with it, and nobody's actually creating one version of the problem.
Yeah, you need
So
a one-stop shop for sectional titles.
100%. So we're facing all these increasing rates. We're paying for security, we're paying for water, backup systems, generators. We even pay for road maintenance where we can get people to fix the potholes from our own communities, Helen. So there's all this double burden on people. It's the rates. In Bedford View, we've started an organization called Better Bedford View, where we're asking the community to pay 200 Rand per household, and we're getting our own stuff done here. So we're fixing potholes. You've seen it around the country. I see you've been involved with these communities. But the pushback that we get is, well, why should we pay rates and taxes and pay a private civic body organization to be doing the work of the municipality? What would the DA, how would the DA address this double burden on residents? Would there be any kind of scheme that you could look at enforcing to give rebates or to channel some of the funds from rates and taxes towards more private bodies?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that people in sectional title schemes are not the only ones who have this. Everyone in a middle-class suburb across Joburg has that burden. Any freehold house has that burden of security, of fixing potholes, of generators, of sun panels, of everything else. So this is a generalized problem. It is not unique to sectional title schemes. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that all else being equal and an efficient government with a solvent municipality in place, all these arrangements would make sense. But I don't know if you saw today that the Minister of Finance has sent another letter to Dada Moreira saying that if he cannot provide sufficient reason by Friday, that's tomorrow, as to why Joburg should not be cut off from national government subsidies, they will be cut off from national government subsidies. That's the USDG grant and a whole lot of other major subsidies. Now, I want to stress to you all that Joburg is bankrupt. Joburg has no more fuel for its fleet. They cannot get cars on the road. 98% of bridges are near the point of collapse in Joburg. I was at one yesterday. Joburg is completely bereft of resources. In the city council itself yesterday, the lights went off because they didn't have fuel for the generator. And they had to have a generator because somehow the electricity connection wasn't working. And there were rats all over the council chamber because they can't do pest extermination properly. It's just extraordinary. The city has a debt to revenue ratio of 60%, which is completely unaffordable. And it is not being able to fund its budget. It's got an illegal budget because that budget is not funded. Corruption is very deep, and it's going to be very difficult to get rid of, although we're going to have to work day and night to get rid of it. But in these circumstances, talking about rates rebates is like saying, you deserve a rebate from a bankrupt person. You can't actually do that because the city has no money. I cannot stress enough. They cannot buy fuel. They cannot pay Eskom. They had an arrangement with Eskom when Eskom last month threatened to cut off the city. They entered into a rearrangement with Eskom Now they've violated that rearrangement again, and Eskom is again threatening to cut off the city entirely. If they haven't got money for the most basic things like fuel for their fleet, they're certainly not going to be able to fix potholes or do anything else. So the city, from 30 years of electoral choices, is now on its knees. It's not at the edge of the abyss. It is over the edge of the abyss. And we're going to try with pulleys and levers and ropes to pull the city back up to the brink of the abyss. That's what we're going to be trying to do if we get a term for the first 5 years. But I want to be very, very frank. Joburg has failed because of the electoral choices the majority of its residents have made. Cape Town has succeeded because of the electoral choices that the majority of its residents made. And anyone who hasn't voted in the past, or has voted for a smaller party, or has voted for the ANC, is complicit in Joburg's failure, I'm afraid to say, because this is the consequence. And now, to get things right, we can't begin by promising rebates. We've got no money. I don't know how we're going to take over in December. The new financial year starts next week on, let me just see, Wednesday, 1st of July. The new financial year starts next week on Wednesday. Then they will have a bit more money, but they will spend it all furiously until November, knowing that they're likely to be voted out. And then we will inherit a totally bankrupt city. And I cannot sit here and start honestly promising that we will give rates rebates or any other kinds of rebates because there's no money. There is no money. The city is on its back and on the floor. So please be realistic about what is possible. Huge amounts of electricity and water are being stolen. We need to solve that problem. We need to solve the incredible problem of looting and corruption. We need to deal with all of this simultaneously. So to talk about rebates at this stage is literally a pipe dream, and I'm not going to promise anything of the kind.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think the writing on the wall for people who have been involved in, ward councils and people in the suburbs who are kind of in the know from a political point of view, the writing has been on the wall for a long time. And I think that's why these private bodies are coming to work side by side with whatever the government of the day is. I think it's a necessity.
Well, the writing on the wall is not enough. I promise you it's not enough. It's not waking people up. And the biggest problem is people who live in gated schemes of any kind.
Yeah.
Because they think they form a little island in this failing city and that they can protect themselves from the consequences of the city's collapse. Well, they can't. If the entire water grid collapses, none of these gated villages are going to be able to sustain themselves. And we're close to that point. If all the bridges collapse and the major infrastructure falls apart, these small islands are not going to be able to sustain themselves. And the extent of capital flight and the extent of businesses closing down and leaving means massive unemployment and massive instability. Nobody can insulate themselves. And the percentage of people in many of these schemes who bother to go out and vote is small. And everyone who doesn't vote in this election is complicit in the problem. Because the only way to fix Joburg, and I'm not doing a political pitch, the only way to fix Joburg is to change the government and to get a stable government without a rickety and unstable coalition. It's the only way you are going to get anything done. And unless people are prepared to do that, there will be no relief of any kind.
100%. I agree with that. What lessons can Johannesburg learn from the successful urban initiatives that were taken in Cape Town, Helen?
Well, the first lesson that you can learn is that when you vote for success, that follows. And people have to vote very carefully because you have to look at what parties' policies are, what their track record is, what their skill set is, all of those things. And then you make a choice. And we had massive turnout from the DA supporting voters, which really helped a massive amount. And we were able to make a better offer than our opponents, and people came out and supported it. We did first have a very difficult coalition to run. It was a 7-party coalition. We succeeded in that. People saw the difference, and then they voted us in with a clear majority ever since. And that's made a huge difference because we don't have to sit there and battle all the time with these incredibly complex coalitions, with these extortionist small parties. So that makes the difference. And for the very first time, for example, in Joburg, we are polling a lot higher than the ANC, so we could do exactly the same. But everyone needs to come out and vote, because you're not only voting for your ward councillor, you're voting for the list as well, the party list. And every 2 votes that you get, and you get 2 votes in a local government election, gives you 3 counts of the votes. I'm not going to explain how that works, but every vote is going to make a massive difference. And our biggest problem is that in our safe DA seats, like Dainfern, who now sits with an ANC councillor, because very few of them bothered to come out and vote because they thought they were going to win easily anyway. Dainfern now sits with an ANC councillor because they didn't bother to go out and vote. That's our problem in Joburg. It wasn't our problem in Cape Town. Now, what happened in Cape Town was that we had we put honest officials in place. It wasn't nearly as broken when we took over, not nearly as broken, but we put honest officials in place. We stabilized the finances. We gave really competent politicians the key portfolios, and they got on with the job. And it wasn't fixed overnight. It took time. But after 20 years of DA governance, which is the 20th anniversary this year, it makes a massive, massive difference. And that's what you see in every single way, including the management of sectional titles. They have this clear communication channel. They know who to contact. They have an efficient response mechanism. They have a very efficient system of wheeling electricity with a double billing meters that can enable you to sell and buy electricity simultaneously off the same meter. All these preparations have been done, and they're there and they're working, but it took 20 years to get them into place.
No, makes a huge difference, absolutely. And I think the use of technology, watching some of the top sort of management structures working in Cape Town, technology has also played quite a big role in setting things right in Cape Town.
An absolutely massive role, I mean, most shocking thing to me when I came to Joburg was to find out that the billing system in Joburg is not digitized. It is still done on spreadsheets. I was so stunned by that, I couldn't believe it. Early on in the DA's tenure in Cape Town, we moved everything onto the SAP system. It was difficult, but it was doable, and it was expensive, but we could afford it, and we did it so that every single department is compatible and talks to every single other one. That's not the case in Joburg. They all have their own separate systems, and they can't talk to each other. They can't connect. And then the billing is done by spreadsheet, because why? When you go onto a computer and have to use a password to access the system, then what you do on that system, your footprint on the system, becomes very visible to anyone. And so you can't switch a meter number, and you can't add a few zeros to somebody's bill, and you can't commit blatant corruption or wipe out somebody's debt, as is currently happening. And that's why they don't want to digitize the system, because having it done with basically pen and paper and pencil, or pencil and a rubber, that's the easiest way of committing corruption, and that's what's going on there. The billing system is not even digitized in Joburg, if you want to know how far back we are in the 20th century.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing I wanted to talk to is this focus on infrastructure, certainly by the Deputy Minister of Finance, Ashaw Sarapeng. He came to my office the other day. Lovely, lovely, lovely man, very clever, from the DA as well. And he was now the federal chairperson of the Federal Council. And he was talking to me about the fact that if we don't understand how dire the situation with regard to infrastructure is, if we don't understand that any money that's coming in needs to be pushed towards infrastructure, then, we've got a very rude awakening. My concern is when all the money is going to infrastructure, which I agree that it has to go to, what happens with the daily stuff in your suburb? You know, the painting of curbs, the cutting of grass. I mean, we know there are no brush cutters, there's no PPE. You know, we get these stories every day. I'm very well aware of them. But would you encourage public-private partnerships?
100%. That's the only way we're going to save Joburg, is by public-private partnerships. I went to the Gullyard Park in, I think it's Fairland. No, it's a new suburb that I'm not aware of, but it's near Glen Hazel and Linksfield, that area,
Right.
which are old suburbs that I am aware of. And there is the most beautiful park called the Gullyard Park that has been done by the community living around it. And it is spectacular. It would be spectacular in any first world setting. And obviously that is really, really high end, but that is happening in many parks across Joburg, and that is a really wonderful thing. We're going to have to do a lot with public-private partnerships, and I'm launching a major one in the poorer areas of Joburg on the 15th of July. And we are coming in with a lot of the equipment, and the community is going to add a lot of the labor to that project. So we have to encourage that, and there's no way that Joburg is going to be rescued without public-private partnerships. I do believe there has to be a balance between investment in infrastructure and investment in daily maintenance of places, of things like grass cutting and curbs and park maintenance and stuff like that. There absolutely needs to be. But when there are 22 water systems that are about to collapse, and I'm serious about that, there's no exaggeration there. When there are 22 water systems in Joburg that are about to collapse, you can understand why we have to put the priority there. In the suburb that I live, we've been without water sometimes for up to 3 to 4 weeks. And when that happens, life literally comes to a standstill. And in key places where, for example, the reservoirs are on bypass, you can't fill the reservoirs because they're so badly cracked and have never been maintained. And to fill the reservoirs, you've got to basically stop the flow of water. And because it is, to fix the reservoirs, you have to stop the flow of water. And then they are gravity fed. And if you don't fill them high enough, there's not enough pressure to force the water through the pipes. So it is one mess after another. You cannot believe how the city's been allowed to collapse and how hard it's going to be to rebuild it. I believe that we can, and we've got a plan for every portfolio, but then people must understand the gravity of the crisis and must understand how carefully we have to prioritize spending. And a lot will have to be done by memorandums of agreement or memorandums of understanding with community groups. We're going to have to do a lot of that to do the daily maintenance in communities.
Yeah, I think that's critical, because that's where, you know, your service delivery expectations come, and you see all the protests and that type of thing. Really important. If I can just move now to security, Helen, we've got the Metro Police are linked to local government, obviously, and they are the supposed enforcers of bylaws. In a community scheme, the security for the inside of the scheme is usually looked after privately by the owners. But at the end of the day, what goes on outside is becoming more and more problematic. And we feel very, very strongly, certainly in my area that I live, that the Metro Police are really invisible in our areas. There's no bylaw enforcement. The only bylaw enforcement are traffic, rules where people can write up tickets and probably collect money like that for themselves. But ultimately, what would the DA? How would the DA get more involved with the Metro Police and how they work?
Well, the Metro Police has a very narrow mandate, but they don't fulfill that mandate. One of the key aspects is the bylaw enforcement, as you rightly say. And bylaws are totally unenforced in Johannesburg. It's quite extraordinary. The only thing that the Metro Police seem to do is traffic roadblocks. That's all I've ever seen them doing. And I would make them switch the focus entirely to, or almost entirely to, by law enforcement. There are municipal courts which are supposed to hear cases of bylaw violations, and they're empty. And there's some magistrates that are paid for every day and they've got no work to do because the Metro Police don't enforce the bylaws. And there will be a major switch to enforcing the bylaws and to partnerships with private sector safety initiatives, the best example of which in Joburg is CAP. And they will definitely partner with those. But their job, their primary job, has to be by law enforcement. And we will drive that and we will train them and we will make sure that they are honest and doing their job. The critical thing is you've got to get the right politician to head up that service, and you've got to get a completely corruption-free top management. And that is hard in that sector, as you've seen in the Madlanga Commission. But we'll put a lot of effort into doing that and to fixing the Metro Police to enforce the bylaws, especially in public spaces, but also with problem buildings and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's bylaw enforcement is, as soon as you start clearing that out, and as soon as people start realizing that there's a fine, if you put up a sign illegally in Johannesburg, there's punitive measures which are enforced. I think things will always follow suit. Wanted to ask you about hijacked buildings. I know that you recently did a video on hijacked buildings as well. I mean, there are over 100 hijacked buildings in Johannesburg with very few court orders to clear the buildings out. Do you think this is overstated in Johannesburg? Are you concerned about the hijacked buildings?
I don't think it's overstated. I think it's understated. And what is happening now is that homes are being hijacked, which is just, unheard of. When people go away and leave their houses empty for a while, then they come back and find someone else has moved in and put a whole lot of shacks in the garden. And these are usually criminal syndicates that are going. And that is a very, very serious problem. Now, it has to involve the South African Police Service, the Metro Police, property owners, often the Department of Home Affairs, being involved together. Now, obviously, often these hijackers are criminal syndicates, and they pay off the police. That's what they do. I've seen it with my own eyes. When a home was hijacked in Ferndale, and the owner called the police, and the police rocked up, and as they were there, a little white polo drove past, opened the window, chatted to the guy, and the policeman moved off again. And that could only have been an interaction saying, if you move off, we'll sort you out, but if you stay here, we'll take you out. And those are the options that people often face. So these are big, serious criminal syndicates, and they go and execute people who get in their way. You'll remember that DJ Waras was murdered in the streets of Joburg because he was trying to evict people out of hijacked buildings, and he was murdered for that. So it's a very dangerous thing. But there are some people who've got it right, very right, and I've been studying their model. One is a Mr. Gerald Olitsky, who is personally responsible for having restored much of Main Street in central Joburg, and I'm really deeply impressed by what he's managed to achieve there. And I've learned a lot about his model now, and I believe it is replicable. And if we work together with the private security companies, which are all over central Joburg, and the Metro Police, and really entrepreneurial individuals who have managed to empty hijacked buildings without igniting a war, I think we can move from space to space and deal with them. Another way of dealing with them is, for example, many people who own those buildings have just abandoned them. They've lost their value, people have abandoned them, and obviously the hijackers don't pay rates and service charges. So one thing the municipality can do is start sales in execution, start selling those buildings and ensuring that the money is kept to pay the rates and service charges that are outstanding, and then get court orders citing Home Affairs as well, to evict the people from those spaces. Now, the law says you've got to create alternative accommodation. There is a plan to do that, and the law is being amended to make it much easier to do that, which I'm very pleased to say. I would immediately start with the city's own hijacked buildings. The city has about 23 hijacked buildings. I would start with those as kind of proof of concept ideas and make sure that we can get those court orders, move people out into temporary accommodation for 3 months, and then refurbish and allocate living spaces to people who qualify and are on the waiting list. It's going to be dangerous, it's going to be difficult, but we have to make a start.
Definitely, and it's really heartening. It was quite heartening for me to visit main road there in Johannesburg the other day with the Josie My Josie contingent as well. A lovely restaurant there. I mean, it's possible. These things are possible. It's wonderful that it happens.
Absolutely is possible. Yeah.
And as an attorney, I also think it's heartening to see that they're looking at fixing up the precinct at the High Court. I spoke to acting judge Dossio, who was showing me the pictures of what they want to do with Josie My Josie as well as the private. So the private sector involvement is key, as we said.
It's absolutely key, and a new government is just as key. You're not going to get anything done unless one hand can wash the other. And that is what we have to do. I mean, Josie My Josie can do small precincts, and we very much welcome that, and we salute them for it. But they can't do a whole city of the size of Joburg. And we're going to have smaller models of that all over the place. I mean, the High Court is in such a derelict state. It is in such a derelict state, you can't believe it.
No, it's terrible. We're scared to send our candidate attorneys there because it's frightening for them. It really is. Yeah, not good.
Anyway, we're going to fix it. We are absolutely going to fix it. We've got a plan for every single portfolio, and we're going to get in there. It's going to take time, but we're going to do it.
Excellent to hear.
But we first have to get elected. That's our biggest problem.
That's it. And I'm going to talk to you just now about registrations and how everybody can assist going forward. But what I wanted to just turn to quickly was the Community Scheme Ombud Service. The service, which is the regulator for all our community schemes. Many trustees, owners, and managing agents that I deal with on a daily basis show concern about the length of time it takes to sort out disputes. And I mean, I've had the chief ombud here on a webinar actually a couple of months ago discussing this very point. This department or this service falls under the Department of Human Settlements. Would the DA be able to improve the effectiveness of the CSOS at all, or would that be within their remit?
My understanding is that the CSOS is not within the local government's remit. And so it would be difficult to do that. But I think a lot of these disputes might be resolved if there was better communication and direct channels to a dedicated desk that deals with share equity schemes. Deals with sectional title and other property schemes. I think that's what we need. And I think it'll deal with a lot of the issues. But, when more people vote for us at municipal, provincial and national level, we'll be able to sort out a lot of these problems.
Definitely. The one thing I wanted to raise, which I found, I've visited Dubai and New South Wales with sectional title because that's, it's quite prolific in those areas. The one thing that came up was that the more powerful that homeowners associations and sectional title schemes become, the more of a threat they create to a government. And in fact, in Hong Kong, there were reports of surveillance being placed on homeowners associations because of the, perceived threat to government, because of these organizations becoming so powerful that they privatize. What I'm trying to say to you is that you would agree with the assumption that we need to create partnerships. We need to create partnerships between governments and these big homeowners associations, estates, etc. They shouldn't become a national threat. And I think that's what local governments need to also bear in mind once they come into power, from this point of view, because it is something that is on the agenda of other countries.
Look, I don't think we're near that point. The big risk for South Africa is that these gated communities see themselves as little islands unaffected by what happens outside, not realizing how profoundly affected they will be by what happens outside. And what they need to do is understand that while they're looking after their own well-being inside the gated community, they have to take an interest in what happens more broadly. They have to understand what is driving the system outside. They have to understand the implications of the collapse of a city, and they have to use every bit of leverage they have to do something about it. And the most important leverage is their vote. So that really has to be used. And people mustn't think that being in a little gated village makes them like a fortified Roman citadel that can't be penetrated from outside. It can and it will. And the collapse of the city will have very profound implications for them.
Definitely. In terms of the latest Lightstone statistics, Helen, we're seeing a lot of women increasingly buying intersectional title. In fact, single women are buying intersectional title in quite a big way. And we're also seeing women increasingly taking leadership roles in managing agencies, becoming trustees, and directors in community schemes. What advice would you give women who are stepping into leadership positions in environments? Sorry, somebody's talking and
Off mute.
please mute. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what advice would you give women who are stepping into leadership positions in these environments, which can sometimes be highly confrontational?
I think the most important bit of advice is get the processes and systems right, and then use them. If everybody thinks the processes work fairly and come to a rational outcome, they're much more likely to accept that outcome. Leadership is not about exercising power to force your will. It is about getting systems that are rational and fair, that people understand and are prepared to use and accept the outcomes of. And that is the best way to resolve the inherent conflict in these conflictual situations.
Right, thank you. That's great advice. Really, really good advice. So we're coming back to registration, because I think people do need to understand registration process. And I must say, I should have probably mentioned this at the beginning. I'm thoroughly enjoying your campaign, by the way. I really am. And I think most of the country, I mean, you've got people talking. And I know there's a youngster involved with your campaign, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because we're loving it, to be honest. But registration, there was a registration weekend now, this last weekend. What is the situation? Can people still register? I enjoyed that video where you did it in the past, where people come to vote on the 4th of November and you said, no, you're too late. You should have voted in June, or you should have registered in June. So talk us through that.
Correct. I mean, it's the worst nightmare that I have, and it happens regularly.
Yeah,
that I'm
definitely.
at a polling station on polling day and someone runs up to me and says, Helen, I want to vote for you. Where do I register? And then I say, it was 6 months ago, pal. You can't register now. And that's how we lose a lot of votes. We lose a huge number of votes by people who don't wake up in time. So the first thing we need to do is understand that the election is going to be declared by the president early in August. And when that happens, the voters' roll closes, and then no one can register again. So we know the date, but the election has not been properly proclaimed by the president. That's the legal term, proclaimed. And when it is, the registration stops, the voters' roll closes. Now there's going to be one more registration weekend on the 1st and 2nd of August. And that is the last time you can actually go and register physically at a voting station. People need to understand that they can only vote if they are registered. They can only register at the polling booth where they are registered. And they must have an ID document, not a passport or a driver's license, in order to vote and in order to register. And if you don't want to go to the polling booth to register physically, you can do it on your cell phone, which is a very easy thing if you've got a smartphone. And you just go onto the internet and type in check.da.org.za, check.da.org.za. And when you've done that, you'll be taken to a page where you're asked to put in your ID number. You put in your ID number and it'll tell you immediately whether you are registered and where you are registered. If that is correct information, then you're done. You don't have to do anything more. If they say you're not registered or you are registered somewhere else, then you need to go further following the prompts to either fix where you are registered and change the place where you are registered, the voting station, or register from the beginning. And that you can do by very simply following the prompts. If any of you, like me, has to get your granddaughter to help you, then you just do that. But it works very, very well for anyone who is even vaguely tech literate.
Excellent. And speaking of granddaughters, a lot of people, we need youngsters to come and vote. So just, let people know what kind of ages can vote. I think
Well,
people might
yesterday
be
I
into.
registered teenagers, twins. I registered twins who are turning 18 on the 4th of November. That's election day. And so it was very nice to be able to say to them that the first thing they can do on their birthday is go out and register. So we can register you if you're 17.
Okay.
We can register you if you're 17, but you can only vote when you are 18.
I see.
And
interesting.
Everybody needs to go out and vote, and every parent and every grandparent must insist that any offspring of theirs or their friends who are eligible to vote must register and vote, because the city desperately needs every single vote for recovery that it can get.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Helen Zille. It's been an absolute treat speaking to you today. I've been looking forward to it all week, and we really appreciate your insight. I think your commitment has been unwavering to tackle really hard issues. You're brave, you're committed, you're dedicated, and as women, we applaud you and we thank you very, very much. Very good luck. All the very best of luck for the 4th of November.
Thanks so very much, Marina. And we all do our bit. I love what I do. I'm sure you love what you do. Everyone loves what they do, hopefully. And we all do it to the best of our ability. And we'll make the city and this country work. It's a collective effort. And we're going to start with Joburg on the 4th of November.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you
Thanks,
for your
everyone.
time today. Take care.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, everybody. See you next month.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.